Hi and welcome to the Active Code podcast, brought to you by Aspire Active Partnerships. I'm Paul Griffiths and joining me each week on the pod is Luke Johnson.
Aspire Active Partnerships is a community of like-minded business leaders who all believe that collaboration in the sports coaching and children's activity sector is essential for success. We've proven that working in collaboration does benefit business growth and essentially helps more children be more active more often.
To combat physical inactivity, we need organisations that are performing at their very best. Organisations will only operate to high standards if they are led well. So, if we can focus on developing high quality leaders throughout an organisation, not just at the top, customers will experience higher quality services, which means heightened enjoyment levels and increased levels of physical activity. And if we do this at an early age, we know that we can build the foundations for a more active, happier and healthier life. The Active Code investigates what it really takes to be a successful leader and how organisations can combat physical inactivity.
We won't be alone through this journey. We are joined by business owners and experts from our sector, as well as inspirational people from outside our industry. We'll understand the importance of physical activity to our guests, reflect on leadership experiences, and gain thought-provoking insights on how we can crack the Active Code and get more children more active more often. If you like what you hear, please leave us a rating and subscribe wherever you get your pods.
Hello and welcome to the Active Code podcast. Today we welcome Ed van Rooyen. Ed is a successful tech entrepreneur, having set up and run a number of very successful organisations. With a background in legal and financial services and a keen interest in sport and physical activity, Ed is passionate about creating successful teams who thrive within the workplace. Ed's most recent venture, Teacup, uses cutting-edge self-reflection technology to improve people's well-being in a measurable and sustainable way using real-time data. Ed, welcome to the Active Code. How are you today?
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks. Very, very good, thank you. A little bit of cold, but soldering on, definitely.
Good stuff. Let's start with Teacup. I've mentioned Teacup there in the intro. If you could just go into a bit more around the backstory behind Teacup, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, of course. So I guess it sort of started, my career leading up to Teacup was about a 20-year whirlwind. It's probably the best way to describe it. It started off as sort of aspirations to play rugby. So sort of played at a semi-professional level. But an injury sort of played a bit of an end to the professional side to that. And my plan B was always to be a lawyer. And I think at the time, harken back to the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, I may have watched a little bit too much Ally McBeal, because my perception of what law was going to be and what it turned out was a little bit different. But anyway, I was quite fortunate, again through, rugby connections, to sort of venture into a financial services business that was sort of fintech business, set up really to help insurers and banks manage high volumes of claims. And we were sort of at the right time, right place. Sort of business was set up in 2006, and 2008 there was a financial crisis, and all of those big institutions had to save a lot of money. So that business saw quite significant growth in a very short space of time, and we had multiple offices all over the world and private equity backing, etc. And it was quite a good journey, but it came to an end in 2018 when I sold the business to a large American firm. And that was probably the time, when I was probably at my lowest, when I should have probably been at my highest. And I wasn't quite sure why I was feeling so low and down in the dumps. But one of my good friends is a chap called Lee Mears, who did play professional rugby for England and played for the British and Irish Lions and so on. Just one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And he was at me constantly, I guess, just to have a bit of a catch up. We knew each other from the gym. We used to train together, do CrossFit together. And he was just wanting to catch up after I'd sold the business, because during that sort of process, I went a little bit in the bunker whilst I was sort of selling it. And when I met him, I think he was quite shocked that I wasn't, over the moon, when off the back of the acquisition. And Mirza, being a good guy, probed me around what did I want out of life, and just trying to get me to get out of my funk, I guess. And my comments back to him was that, what I really wanted, and I was desperate to have it, but I didn't know why, was just to be healthy, and I wanted to be happy, and I wanted to feel successful. And despite having gone through this acquisition, I didn't feel successful. Too many late nights, probably for my legal career, where, sleeping 3 hours and working 21, gives you a badge of honor. I certainly wasn't as healthy as I wanted to be. And despite all the money that a sale of a business bring out, I certainly wasn't happy. So Lee's sort of background in professional sport at, the sort of pinnacle of sport where everything's measured, asked me, a very simple question. Well, how do you measure that? How do you measure health, happiness, success? How do you know where you are, and how do you know where you're going? And that really was the catalyst for me to just think, that's a really good question. If you don't know where you are, it's very hard to know where you're going. And very quickly, I guess, maybe Lee was just being a friend, trying to get me, to sort of chat about my feelings. But very quickly, it became a bit of a self-obsession to be able to measure why I wasn't feeling the way I did. And we both live in Bath, and Bath University were very good. We knew a number of sports scientists and professors at the university. We sort of just engaged with them around, how do you actually measure happiness? How do you measure success? And equally, how do you health's a little bit easier. There's so much stuff out there. How you can measure health, you can weigh yourself, you can measure all sorts of metrics, variable heart rate, etc. But it was a bit harder to measure happiness and also success. And what we didn't know at the time, even though I just wanted to be healthy, happy, and successful, bit of a throwaway comment, was that the World Health Organization's definition of well-being is broadly, people leading healthy lives in the absence of disease, happily contributing to society and feeling successful. So in a way, we were trying to build a well-being tracker. And the university were very keen to work with us, and quickly got in touch with a chap who has sort of been very influential in Teacup's life, called Gary Pratt, who just got us in touch with the right people to start looking at how do we measure and track these things. And that was really the start of it. And, initially just for ourselves, but that was really the backstory of how Teacup came to be.
Amazing. I think it's really good as well to hear the kind of connections that you've made there from the rugby background, so starting playing rugby. And I'm sure from those people listening to the pod with experience of playing competitive sport at any level, I think the importance of those friendships and the social side of sport clearly has had an impact there on you, Ed, as well.
Massive. And, I think, those connections, it's amazing how, and my background is in rugby, but amazing how you form networks. And we're seeing it now, particularly with Teacup. I never knew I played with so many teachers, and some of those guys who were teachers or PE teachers are now deputy heads or heads of schools and trusts. And it's just amazing how, as you say, those networks work. And which probably leads me on to, one of the most important things in business is just being a good person. I think, if you can be a good person and be true in your drive to help, then I think karma comes round.
And when you sold the business, you said you were at a bit of a low. Was that because you didn't have a plan in place for after exit? Was that one of the reasons? Did you actually have a plan in place of right, I'm going to sell the business and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z? Or was it a case of I'm just going to sell the business and see what happens?
Yeah, there was a clear plan, and the plan initially was to stay and work with the American firm. To put in context, we had a few hundred people. They employ several thousands of people. So the plan was actually initially for me to work with the acquirers, and they were very big in the US, and they wanted to extend their the European build, shall we say, the European presence. but quickly that turned out to be, expectations are very different, and it's very, and there's always two sides to a story. But it was very quick. I came to the realization that, I'm quite an impatient person. I want to get stuff done. I love nothing more than coming up with ideas and seeing those, good or bad, seeing them fail or seeing them succeed. And in a large organization like that, change doesn't happen as fast. But there was also lots of challenges with, just for me, the core of it was really that and the only thing I link it to, and it sounds extreme, but I spoke to the team about it yesterday because they sort of quizzed me about it. And I said, in the context of one of the team members is attending a funeral today. And I said, at funerals, they are such somber events, but they end up afterwards. It's quite a nice get together of people who've not seen each other for ages. And somehow people all just, relax and they get on. And the sale of the business, even though we've had private equity where it's like a mini sale, fundraising, was almost the opposite. It was supposed to be this massive celebration, and it was almost the opposite. It was almost the effort that got it to that stage. Everybody was quite drained, and I think the expectations of what the plan looked like post deal, and the reality of being exhausted, and actually realizing that I've neglected my health. Yes, we had this pot of cash, but, we can go wherever we wanted on holiday, and you can finally buy that car or that house that you wanted, but you can't turn back the clock. For example, the amount of holidays I cancelled, growing up in South Africa, the amount of holidays cancelled to go and see family, who aren't there anymore. Now there's no point flying business class going to see people who aren't around anymore. And it was those sort of reflections and the sale of the business that created that stop. There wasn't that immediate, there was a plan, but it wasn't the same plan as, guys, we have to hit the numbers, we're going to do the sale, we go through the whole process. It was a much more chilled, sort of relaxed, the pressure was off. And it was that moment that I had reflected and realized that the pot of gold didn't warrant the sacrifices. And I felt, bluntly, I felt unfit, I felt unhealthy. And I think that was the catalyst for why, even though there was a plan, it was just so unattractive that I was just fundamentally unhappy.
Yeah, really, really interesting how that links into that health, happiness, and success as well. It's a really, really interesting story. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Many of our listeners, Ed, work in or with schools, so will be very interested in the recently launched school wellbeing solution with Teacup. So how does this help schools improve wellbeing across their school community?
Yeah, well, I think, it starts off with Teacup's why, and a big part of our why is we want to help people thrive. And we've been doing that for about 3 years with organizations, working with HR directors, people directors, etc. But one of the, and it's probably worth just explaining a little bit how we got into schools, because the whole Teacup solution was initially designed for organizations. But many of the organizations we work with, including myself, have kids. And the way we designed the technology was to be really friendly, almost gamified in a way that you can just reflect on the key things that impact your well-being. And through lockdown, many of the parents, obviously all parents, had to school, home teach your children, etc. And there was a national sort of well-being week around well-being, and that the schools and where I live, there was big initiatives around that as well. And many of my children and many of the users' children, also the parents have started using the tech with the kids, because it's a really nice and fun and interactive way to engage with well-being. So off the back of that, we almost, I wouldn't say, we've not completely pivoted, but the business has quickly realized that the tech is very well suited for a younger audience where, there's inquisitive minds, gamification is digital solutions fit really well. So off the back of, a why of the business, our vision to help people thrive, and, I guess being blessed with a team, including educationalists, who want to, design a formula to unlock that thriving element. We've just slightly tweaked the technology in a way that, we can help students by providing all the students with, access to technology to reflect on the emotions, on the activities, on their mood, and so on. And then we can, similar to what we do with organizations, we aggregate and anonymously present the data of those reflections back to the school leaders to be able to determine how the boys versus the girls are, different age groups, different year groups, form groups, and so on. And it's through those reflections and the educational setting is almost perfect because there's a drive which we're so pleased about around well-being and not just teaching a traditional curriculum, but also helping people deal and cope with stress, teaching those life skills. So most of the schools are using the technology a few times during the week, call it Teacup Thriving Tuesdays or Wednesday Wellbeing Days or whatever. But, they've got all different sessions, but it literally takes a few minutes for them to engage with give the kids a little bit of that time, a couple of minutes to reflect. And then the schools have the data to see how the kids are trending on their well-being.
And from that data and the schools that have used it so far, what's been the teachers' feedback?
Yeah, I think it's been overwhelming in many ways. How positive they've been around, I guess, like parents, well-being. I think traditionally, if we rewind a little bit, I think well-being is often seen as something that we discuss when things go wrong. So I know many schools would have a teddy that you talk to when you're stressed, etc. One of the fundamental things that we believe is, we need to reflect all the time. Every day is good on the good things and bad things. And coming back to your direct question around teachers is, giving them a tool that empowers the students to have that minute of reflection, but then providing them with insight in terms of where the challenges lie. Is it the mood? Is it the hydration? Are it certain cohorts, etc.? It's been really, really powerful. Because again, schools have got so much resources around that can support students, but it's the ability to put that resources in front of the children when they need it most. And that's really where the technology helps them. So we've been overwhelmed by their support and enthusiasm for the solutions.
And as an organisation who's used TCAP in the past and currently uses it at the moment, I think it's a really nice way to try to make organisations and schools in particular be probably proactive around wellbeing rather than reactive. And as you say, normally we don't do anything until we realise something is wrong. Personally love the approach. The feedback from our team has been great, but I was just wondering if it's worth just explaining to the listeners like the process and how that works and the options that TCAP have. I think it's just be useful to explain that.
Of course, yeah, and thanks for the feedback. It's always good to.
It's fine.
I think the first thing is our core process relies on, like I said, a measure around what is our, your health, happiness, and success. So our formula looks at the 9 key areas that impact our health, our happiness, and our success. And what we've done is we've looked at these core things, and they're not rocket science. When we look at health, we're looking at things like what we eat, our diet, our hydration, and we look at our activity as an example. So the process is very simple. Is we provide access to our formula either via apps or desktop solutions or solutions that can be accessed via text periodically. But the user really, when they click, the student or the teacher or even the parent, when they get the questions, they go through a 60-second process, and it's quite animated, where they would be asked a very simple question to reflect on yesterday's hydration or a diet or activity, mood, and so on. at the end of that process, the technology, what is really clever is whilst these 9 things impact all of us, they don't all necessarily impact all of us the same. So some students may be, some, not just students, people, some need more sleep, some will dehydrate faster. Girls dehydrate slower than boys, for example. So the key with the technology was to bring a little bit of machine learning in, so that as individuals answer questions, the technology can build a baseline for each individual. And the key with the baseline is, as you've reflected after your 60 seconds reflection, is the technology will then serve up a little snippet of information and maybe some resources around topping up the area the areas that need concern. So in simple terms, if a student is struggling with sleep and their mood is low, then the technology will access in lots of expert-led resources, go and pick some appropriate resources for that child. And that really is the process. There's a lot of gamification involved, where every day that a user reflects, they get rewarded virtual T-Bucks, which is just a teacup made up currency. And that T-Bucks can unlock prizes. And schools, those prizes don't necessarily mean money. That could be anything from the class of the most collective T-Bucks, go to dinner, go to lunch hall first, or, some of them unlock some well-being activities. And as I said, that sort of process, over any device, whatever technology the schools or organizations use, that can be accessed. And then as users and students and teachers fill out their daily cups and get to become more self-aware, that process is massively powerful. There was a big case study with Bath University that tested its efficacy. But as I said, at the end of that process, the data is presented back anonymously to the organization to, in real time, be able to see which year groups or cohorts, etc., need support. And that, as you highlight, offers the opportunity for schools to have a very much a proactive response.
Great stuff. And when we're talking about the 9 areas there, Ed, how important is physical activity in the whole wellbeing agenda?
Yeah, I think it's as important as every other element, and I think physical activity, we all know the benefits of being active and happy hormones. I think what we say to many of our customers is all 9 of the areas we believe are important, but the level of importance absolutely varies from user to user. And this is where the technology is really, the way we use technology is very interesting, because if, for example, through a self-reflective process, activity, and don't get me wrong, activity is super important, but as is sleep, as is hydration. But it's really important for people to start to understand the difference that, if they had a good day, to start drawing those correlations themselves, that actually, whenever I walk to school and maybe spend some time playing football with my friends or rugby with my friends, or whatever it is, we're a bit more active, actually I feel really good. And actually I sleep better that night compared to maybe a Sunday when I have a pajama day at home and I don't really get to move much and I watch too much TV and maybe I eat too much on a Sunday roast. And that's really where I think this is such an important part of the process. All of these things interact. We all, and you guys know this particularly well, how important activity is to children. But it's, one of the things we want to do is unlock people's potential by them self-discovering that importance and starting to draw that correlations that, sometimes a good day, there's a lot of things I can control, and activity, diet, and hydration are those 3 things I can absolutely control. And they massively influence my day. So becoming self-aware through that process is, that's where the magic happens when people start unlocking and understanding the importance of activity for themselves. But it is absolutely crucial. It is critical.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I think the whole balance thing is very, very important. And obviously we can educate children as young as the primary school years, then that's something I hope we can take through as a habit in later life, and they know that balance is crucial. We mentioned data quite a bit, and at the start you said if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, and it's something else we've touched on in previous pods and in different areas, not to do with well-being, but I think it's a really important point to raise again. But where with regards to that data, how important is it to help us enhance well-being and activity in particular using Teacup?
Yeah, I think it's critical. I think we live in a world where everything's measured, and we are just rightly or wrongly conditioned that way. Everything comes down to numbers, how fast we drive, how much we eat, how much we weigh, etc. And I think there's two schools of thoughts there. We can either fight that, or we can play with that and say, people generally quite like numbers. They quite like trends. So if we can present back visually your well-being to you, and you can actually see visually that whenever I have good days, I'm active, and whenever, more often than not, when my well-being's a little bit lower, I'm not as active on those days. That is a really, really powerful thing, because just generally adults are awful at reflection, and we see this with schools. It's almost the older the child gets, the worse the reflection gets, to the point where as adults we just focus on targets, future things. We don't stop and look back. And I think this is where data and things like activity is critical. And the impact of other things, if we are going to be more active, then, maybe we should drink more water. And actually, when we are more active, we can see children generally eat more healthy. So I think it is almost impossible, I think, to sometimes, we can turn a blind eye to data and say it's over analysis. But I think if we can make it very simple and very easily to digest for even from a young age, then we can get people to become much more self-aware and then understand the importance of things like activity.
So, as you've said, Ed, along with the other 8 areas, physical activity has got huge potential to enhance our well-being. So even, a quick 10-minute brisk walk can increase our alertness, energy levels and mood, and regular physical activity can increase our self-esteem and can reduce stress and anxiety. For you personally, following your rugby days, what physical activity do you get up to?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I look at activity very differently, and it's interesting. I used to, do all sorts and quite extreme CrossFit, and unless you're in a pile, you've not exercised hard enough, or go on want to cycle up Montafon 2-3 times in 12 hours to prove that big boys can cycle up hills too, sort of thing. And I've always loved those challenges, and I still have, still try and do a couple of those a year, where I just have something that challenges me a little bit. But one of the chaps in Teacup is a guy called Alec Harwood, who is a bit of a CrossFit guru. I think at one point in time, he was the UK's number 1 CrossFit athlete. And he got me to think about activity completely differently using NEAT. Are you guys familiar with NEAT? I'm sure you are. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And basically looked at it much more of, activity doesn't mean like lycra up. It doesn't necessarily, doesn't have to be those things. It could also just be walking more, So for me, my weekly routine is I try and do 10,000 steps a day, just by walking. And then I try and fit in at least 4 other activities on top of that. And that could be a couple of bike rides. One of my mate, Lee Mears, will try and hit the 50K bike ride over the weekend at some point. And then maybe 2 or 3 gym sessions where I just go in and just do a little bit of conditioning stuff. So I think my mindset around activity has changed, where I look at how can you be active by not being active, by not exercising, if that makes sense. How can you walk, take the stairs, walking in the garden, playing with your children, walking your dog, etc. So I think that's really important, and that has transformed the way I've looked at it. Because if you just get your steps in, you're a long way ahead already in terms of just being active for a couple of hours a day. Everything on top of that is a bonus.
Yeah, kind of building it into your natural day-to-day, I guess, and make it habitual. So if you have a day where you don't get enough exercise in or that planned 10,000 steps, do you feel any difference in your performance at work?
Yeah, massively. I think there's a few things that really impact my mood, having, used the tech for a few years. One is sleep, one's activity. And I can get away, I think coming back from my previous pre-teacup world, I think you can put a mask on and just soldier through things. But I think where activity really messes me up if I don't exercise is sleep. And that's been really interesting. Yes, it gives you a natural high when you exercise and it's fun and you feel accomplished. But for me, the big impact, if I don't exercise for a few days, is it really impacts my sleep negatively. It's almost like my body just needs to be as tired as my mind. And that then very quickly, if I have a few nights bad sleep, that very quickly turns my mood the wrong way. And then I should wear a cap, don't approach, it's not nice. So I think becoming aware of that, and that's when I mentioned before, all these things are interlinked, is really important. But yeah, I can get away with not, things happen, you get a cold, plans change, weather is bad, etc. But I think it's being realistic and aware of that, and not having a knock-on impact, not going weeks without exercise.
And sticking with physical activity in particular, how can Teacup help people, and in particular children and young people, really get the message of the benefits of physical activity?
Yeah, I think it's this, it's nudging and pulling. I think, like I said, younger people are quite self-aware, but these habits and self-awareness doesn't get built overnight. I think the way we try and do it is, when I say nudge is when children aren't active, the app will encourage them to be active. There'll be fun activities. And again, it's here where some schools have been phenomenal around. One school in particular in Hertfordshire has done so much good around coming up with gamifications that get kids moving. So there's a game one school developed called Snap Active, for example. It's this, the card game Snap, with a few basic exercises on that. If you snap on those, the last person to snap, and it was 10 burpees, then you have to do 10 burpees and stuff like that. So bringing some of those gamification concepts into some of the tech as well as the awareness is a nice way to increase activity. And then the other side of it is, I don't want to harp on too much with data, but it's really, really good when you can aggregate the data and you can present it back in a class form and show that the whole class activity is maybe perhaps a little bit low, and getting kids to understand those things, as a reason to go and exercise. One of the things Bath University has been really good is when you look at ambition, for example, our drive to want to do things. With adults, it's quite easy. We can decide to do things or not. We are often in control of our own minds and our diaries and so on. But kids aren't so much. They get told to go to school, they get driven to school, etc. So it's working with them to understand, to build on them wanting to do things, and often them becoming more self-aware is a good way to want to help understanding the benefits of active lifestyles. But equally, that, a problem shared is a problem halved. If you can encourage and have open conversations, not just when things are bad, but about the benefits of activity and in group format, and come up with group activities, and then actually show your group trends going up, that's hugely motivational for children. Around, kids want to do well. They want to be on top of leaderboards. And if you can, and they want their trends to be high but bringing that level of, like I said, gamification and a little bit of insight in terms of trends to their attention is part of, I think, unlocking them wanting to be more active for themselves, but also for their friends.
Yeah, I don't suppose you've come across a school yet that would put the results from the checkups and teacup into perhaps like parents' evenings or feedback to parents.
Yeah, we have. So we've there's a few schools in Hertfordshire that allowed us to use their data as a community data, where we looked at the looked at the schools, and they shared those results with the parents around. And that was an interesting study because that was a correlation between children's well-being during half term compared to school term. And what was fascinating and actually really encouraging from the schools is the well-being was actually lower during the school term. And this again just shows the vocation that some teachers have. They didn't try and hide the fact. They were very open around what was the difference. Why were children thriving? Their well-being compared to during the holidays compared to school, and there was a marked difference.
And so that data again, Ed, I guess that data gives you the power to show that, and it gives you the opportunity to get or to be proactive and exactly. Look at things what can we do more of to make sure these wellbeing levels are even higher during term time, and maybe even higher during term time. That would be the dream from a school's perspective compared to the holidays.
Yes.
And I think the buy-in from parents, we spoke about this with other guests on the pod, that the buy-in from parents is in particular important with things like this. So is that data shared with parents as well, so they get to see where their children are?
Yeah, I think in the whole of schools it is. We encourage each child to share their own data trends with their family. But the combined data is absolutely shared with the parents. And one of TCAP's commitments when we work with schools is to actually extend the technology to their families as well. And we don't charge for that. And that is just, again, because I guess as parents, children don't come with manuals. And most parents aren't wellbeing experts. They don't always know how to have these conversations. They don't always have access to resources. So I think helping and extending that education into the family home is really interesting and important, which we absolutely do. So most parents do get access to the data, but also get access to the tech.
And do teachers buy into it as well?
Yeah, I'd say 85% of them do. There's always a little bit of skepticism with some, but again, the vast majority, are very hugely supportive. I think teachers don't not buy into the concept. I think teachers are just super stretched, from resource perspective. So I think when we start, there's almost oh my goodness, is this going to create more work for me? If I have the data, I have to do something with it. And I think that's really where working with partners like such as yourselves, that's really where our vision for 22 is huge, to extend to people who can help, not just with the process, but also with the problem.
Sorry, Ed, go on.
Yeah, no, go for it.
As I say, we also need that shift from the top as well, because schools at the moment are very much judged on performance in terms of maths and English. How good would it be actually if we saw a well-being score measure for pupils and for schools? And because if we get that right, then the rest of it falls in line as far as I'm concerned, with regards to academic achievement. If we've got healthier, happier, more successful children, then we're going to see the impact on the academic side of things. But for whatever reason, I think we tend to see much more of a focus on the academic side of things prior to the well-being. So hopefully we'll start to see a shift in that, and hopefully TCAP are at the forefront of that as well.
I certainly hope so. I think there has to be a shift towards. We can't sit back. TCAP work with a lot of organisations outside of schools, a lot in the construction industry. It can't be right that we are, as a country, one of the wealthiest in the world, yet we have one of the highest suicide rates. Largest mental health issues. it can't be right. We're not getting something right. And fundamentally, I think we believe the teacup, that is because we don't want to talk about it. There's a stigma. And I think a big part of it is, it's not that it starts at schools. It's in our houses. It's ingrained through, few generations where we just don't talk about these things. But in many of the schools, before we engage with them, a lot of these issues like mood is not something we talk about until it's a bad thing. And I think, it's absolutely our passion to try and bring that well-being measure into organizations and schools. We have it's important.
Absolutely. And you've helped many organizations, and us at Aspire as well, and our teams reflect and instill well-being. But when it comes to your team, how do Teacup ensure well-being is top of your agenda?
Yeah, so it's interesting. One of the things we do with Teacup is employees have the ability to unlock a 4-day working week. And when I say the ability, is they can buy back with their T-Bucks the 5th day of a week back to work on their well-being. So in essence, in simple math, every day you answer questions, you can acquire 10 T-Bucks. If you present 70 T-Bucks at the end of the week to your line manager, then you can buy back your Friday or your next Monday, etc., off work. Now that's important. That there's two principles there that's really important, which is people are time poor. I just mentioned we're the wealthiest we've ever been, but one thing we don't have, not just teachers, most people are time poor. So I think a Teacup giving people space to work on their well-being is critical. So we don't just give people a 4-day week and say, hey, have a day a week off to go and do whatever. We want them to use the tech to become self-aware, to know what they should work on their well-being. So that works well. I'd say about 80% of people regularly only work a 4-day week. So they have that time to work on that. And again, we've made it very much part of our culture that a Monday morning is our well-being check-in. And again, we've tried to shift things around a little bit, where most organizations will meet Monday morning to talk about goals for the week. We just talk about our feelings and how we feel. And that's just based on, again, looking at our own trends, and globally, Mondays, people's motivation is quite low. So actually trying to have a session about targets for the week when people are at their lowest is not necessarily always the best thing to do. So we just have the dashboards up by team and talk about how we're feeling, how we can support one another. And we've just made that part of our culture.
Awesome. One of the reasons for the pod is to investigate how we can get more people more active more often. And it's always, it's not a simple problem to solve. We all know that. But if there's one crucial factor that we've got to get right, in your opinion, what would that factor be to get more people more active more often?
Yeah, I think the key is asking people their reasons, for if they want to thrive. Do they truly want to thrive? And I think almost working back with the end in mind, if you want to thrive, one of the key things, what does it look like if you don't do that? Is I think always an interesting question, but I think it's just that reflection, that reflective reflection. Why are you doing it? Who are you doing it for? I think that for me was the most powerful thing. And I think as humans and as people, we are very good at looking after others, be it our kids, be it our pets, our parents. And I think it's just understanding your reason for why. Why do you want to thrive? Activities for me is a way to unlock thriving. It's not thriving to its end, and I think it's a critical element. So I think it's understanding people's why. Going back to that conversation I had with Lee, I knew what I wanted, but I had no clear direction or way to measure where I was or how to unlock it. but I knew why I wanted to thrive and feel that way was for my family. And I think equally, if we just get people to understand that in a little bit more detail and just almost write in their why every day, then I think they'll start recognizing the importance of things, of taking care of themselves and their physical activity.
Yeah, I really like the thought of physical activity helping to unlock you thriving. That's a really nice message. If listeners wanted to research strategies for improving well-being, they've obviously got Teacup to refer to and take a look at. But are there any books, podcasts, or people you would recommend too?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think for me, recently, one of the most powerful books was actually a fictional book, which again probably fits more in the spiritual, the why, which was The Midnight Library and the Book of Regrets, because I think often we and the reason I think that's a good book to read, just to understand life's got decisions and every decision's got consequences, but it doesn't mean others were necessarily better, because we often live in what ifs, wish I had done that, etc. And it comes back to being in the moment. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, just from a business perspective, but also the way he looks at our why as individuals or as businesses, our motivation, our drivers. I think those are critical. And the leadership podcast is very good as well, often with Johnny Wilkinson and others, which I love those sort of chats. I listened to a pod of them the other day that talked a lot about why should people be more selfish and be like athletes, which I thought was a really fascinating listen around, athletes do everything they can to be superhumans, to do their job better. And as corporate athletes, we think just doing our job better means working more and neglecting our health. We want to fit everything, exercise, diet, good sleep around what we do, as opposed to looking after ourselves first. I think those are good podcasts. Those would be my recommendations.
Brilliant. Thank you. And a final question, Ed. If listeners want to connect with you, what platforms can they find you on?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. It's probably the most active. I'm not a massive social media, through our website or directly by email, which is super simple. But I think LinkedIn is probably the best one. It's the one there where I'm on most active, shall I say.
And what's the website address for Teacup, Ed?
It's Teacup, which is tcup.co.uk.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, and thanks so much for your time today. I've certainly sat here and reflected whilst listening to yourself, and I think I've realised as well. Well, I have realised that how crucial it is to plan that reflective time into your day, and it's something that I'm aware that I need to do. But like you say, kind of life goes in front of you 100 miles an hour with work and family and friends and the rest of it. And it's too easy sometimes to forget about reflecting, because I guess that you've got to make yourself a priority. And there's probably not a lot of people, leaders in particular in our sector, that do that, because they're just so busy. And I think by making yourself a priority once in a while, I think people probably need to realise that it's not actually being selfish; it's necessary to do. So no, thank you for today. I think that it's clear that your passion around thriving is there for everyone to hear, and the work that you're doing is great. You clearly enjoy it, and you're very enthusiastic about it. And I'm sure more doors will open with opportunities both in and out of the education sector, just to help more people thrive. I think it's a great concept, and it's something that I think will help many more people going forwards.
Yeah, thank you very much. And, I think the last thing I'd say, I say this to a lot of businesses, entrepreneurs and listening to you around reflection. But I think the thing that people need to remember is you get multiple shots at business, but you only get one shot at life. There's businesses can come and go and they can fail, you can go again. But, once your health's gone, once your family's gone, you can't get some of that stuff back. So it's really important to just reflect on those things whilst and make time for them whilst you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Ed. Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Join us next time for the Active Code podcast. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with us on Twitter @aspire_partners and find out more about us and the network at www.aspireactivepartnerships.co.uk.